Lepcha from Fateh Public School, and today we are going to discuss the lesson in English for the students of class 10. In the first chapter you will find the title A Letter to God written by G.L. Fuentes. G.L. Fuentes is a Mexican writer, a poet, novelist and journalist. If you find his writings and his books, you will find lots of values for life and virtues to inculcate in our daily life. So as we go further in this chapter 2, you will find the 3 most important values that we can follow in our day-to-day life. So before we go further, let me explain to you in a gist this whole chapter. The main protagonist or the character of this chapter is Lencho. Lencho is a farmer, expects rain shower to nourish his field of corn. He is confident that his harvest is going to yield him huge profit. As all of us know, farmers are always dependent on climate and weather for their good harvest. And here too we find Lencho waiting for the good downpour or rainfall in order to nurture his harvest. Thus, it does happen. Rain comes, but what happens later is that it destroys all of his harvest, and with that he goes into depression, or he was very distressed. But he didn't lose hope, and he holds hope only in one thing, that is his God. Thus he decides to write a letter to God in order to get some pesos. Pesos are Latin American's currency, such as countries like Brazil, Spain, Argentina. These are the places, countries that they use currency pesos. So he writes, God, send me 100 pesos so that my family and I may not go hungry for this year. The letter reaches nowhere, but it reaches to the postmaster, and at the end the postmaster decides that he is going to help this man, and he decides to collect the money, and he sends at least 70 pesos signing as God. When this letter reaches Lencho was not at all surprised. As he opens the envelope, he finds only 70 pesos, and he thinks to himself, is it not this postmaster and the employees who has done something messy? Thus he writes back again the letter to God and tells, oh God, if you send the money again, please do not send through the mail, because I find some crooked fellows in this post office. So that's how the story ends. As we go further with the chapter, you will more understand the whole story in a clarity. So here, in your book you will find the chapter starts with this. The house, the only in the entire valley, sat on the crest of a low hill. From this height, one could see the river and the field of ripe corn. So here you can see in the images, a house in the crest of a hill. Crest of a hill means on the top of the hill, and from there you could have a very clear view of the river and the ripe corn. So we can understand this Lencho's family was so attuned with the nature, and they were in very good atmosphere, and that's how they were living their livelihood or their daily life. And in this image you can see the woman who was preparing supper. The woman was probably the wife of Lencho, and his older sons were working in the field, and his youngest were playing among themselves. So you see the whole atmosphere is so homely and so lovable. And thus what happens is that as his wife goes to call Lencho for the dinner or the supper, Lencho was so proud to see the weather changing, or from the northeast the wind was blowing, and that was the sign that there could be a rain. So that's how he tells his wife, now we are really going to get some water, woman. That means that they are going to have a downpour or rainfall, which was very much needed for their field. As the rain falls, Lencho was so happy and his whole family were overjoyed, and in meanwhile, how he explains or exclaims, you can see here is that he says, these aren't raindrops falling from the sky, they are new coins. That means the rain that is falling from the sky, that would really nurture his field, and at the end when he sells his crops, he would gain lots of money. That means it is for his livelihood or for his daily life to use. And next we find, as he was enjoying with the rain, and even the kids were going out playing around in the rain like most of us do when it rains, and what happens is that suddenly the rainfall turned into hailstorms, damaged the crops. Did you see here? The rainfall turned into hailstones. I hope you understand what is hailstones. Hailstones are those, you can see in the images, I do not know in your language, but I think it is, you know it by looking in the image itself. This is known as hailstones. That destroyed the whole crops, and that was indeed very, very bad. That's what happens to Lepcha. Lepcha's soul was filled with sadness. Just before he was very happy seeing the rainfall, but now he is very sad because why? His whole crops is damaged and destroyed by the hailstones. Now he does not know what to do next. He sits and thinks, what would he do next? And at the end, what he thought is, he thought only of his one hope, the hope of God. So his hope was only God. As I've written here also, my help comes from God. So that was his expression, or that was the vent of his feeling at this most saddest or most sad or sorrowful situation. So thus, at the end, he gets an idea. He gets an idea to write a letter to God. Have you ever done in your life writing a letter to God? It sounds quite strange, right? But I have done it. It's not that I posted in the post office, but it's in my personal diary. It really helps when you are downcast or when you are really discouraged in life. If you take your note and jot it down, it really helps you out. So that's how this Lepcha does in his very sorrowful situation. That's what he writes. Let's read together. God, if you don't help me, my family and I will go hungry this year. I need 100 pesos. I have already explained to you what is pesos. It's Latin American currency. In order to sow my field again, Lepcha. So this was the simple man who has a great faith in God, and he writes a letter to God. And what happens next? It's not ended only writing a letter. He goes further and posts that in the post office. At the end, the letter reaches to the postman, and when he finds this letter, the address is to God. You see, postman laughed heartily and showed a letter to the postmaster. He was so surprised. First time in his career, he's finding an envelope addressed to God. He was laughing a lot. He had a very hearty laugh, and he goes to the postmaster and he hands over that letter, which was addressed to God. And what happens after that? Postmaster was quite serious about that. First he laughs, but slowly he finds quite seriousness in this case or in this situation, and he says, let's not laugh. This man is a very simple man and has a great faith in God. Let's not destroy his faith. So he decides, even from his salary, he takes some amount and he calls his employees and says, can we have this man? So as they come together, they collected, to keep the righteous faith in God, the postmaster collected 70 pesos and answered the letter signing from God. So the postmaster does not end just laughing at this particular poor man, a simple man, but he decides to help this man, and at the end he collects 70 pesos altogether, even from his, perhaps he has given more from his salary amount and he asks from his employees, he collects 70 pesos and posts back to Lepcha, writing, signing as God. Then what happens? On following Sunday, he was a regular visitor, suppose, to the post office. He comes to the post office, it was quite earlier than the usual days. And that much of faith this Lepcha had in God. He was so determined and he knew that God is going to answer his letter. That's how he goes back to the post office. As he goes, on having found the letter and money, Lepcha showed the slightest surprise. If you and me could be in his place, what would be our reaction? But this man, that much deeper faith he has in God, he was not at all surprised. He knew it that God is going to answer his letter. Finding only 70 pesos, he gets suspicious about the post office employees. Now you see, this is quite contradictory to his faith as a good human being, because he is now suspecting the employees. But let's not look at that, but let's look at the positive side, that the deeper faith that he has in God. And what happens to him? Now he is not satisfied with 70 pesos. Now he is quite doubtful. He says, I asked for 100 pesos, but how come I'm getting only 70 pesos. And what does he do? He runs to the post office again, and he takes perhaps he borrowed the pen and the paper, and he immediately starts to write another letter. And what was that letter? It's quite funny. Let's read it. He writes, God, of the money that I asked for, only 70 pesos reached me. Send me the rest, but don't send me through the mail, because the post office employees are a bunch of crook, lencho. So this is quite interesting and quite humorous, because the people who helped him, now he is blaming them and saying that they might have taken. This is all of us, that what we have, some suspicious nature, or that is a human nature that we have. But let's only focus on the deeper faith of this man. How could he know that God is going to read again his letter? See, he is writing back again and telling that this is what it is. I have received only 70 pesos, but God, please send me 100 or the rest pesos, that is 30 pesos left once again, but not through the mail, but maybe through other means. So that's how your lesson, first lesson in your book, it ends. So my dear students, let's forget about whatever Lencho's reaction was after getting the pesos, but let's see what the lesson is going to teach us. The writer, as I told you in the beginning, that writer is, in his writings, always teaches us some values and virtues to follow in our life. So in this chapter, we have come across these three virtues, or so to say the good values, that is faith. Faith of a simple farmer, Lencho, and next we find hope. He lost all his crops, but he didn't lose hope. One hope was hope in God. Thus he writes letter. And what about charity? Charity we find amidst or among the postmaster and the employees. See their willingness to help someone in need. Thus they collected the money and they helped Lenchos. So my dear students, let's also follow these 4 values or virtues in our life and learn from this chapter, A Letter to God.